Well, here we are, an outside studio, the bright sun. This is a weaver's nest. Bird goes in there. And I'm going to be doing a sgraffito, which is scratching into the paint, making a painting. Hopefully it works out. See you later. So we have our weaver's nest. And the decision now is which way do we want to. I really want it to sit in the middle of the canvas. So we have this little hole. Now this is an abandoned weaver's nest, so there are pieces hanging off. The weaver male usually makes the nest, and then the female comes along and decides whether she wants it or not. So we have angles that we could use. I love this negative shape that's happening here, and this is a very important aspect. So what we're doing is I'm going to just lightly sketch up the angle. I'm looking at it at this angle. I've got a charcoal pencil, and I'm going to get my basic shape in here, like that. The little sticks are going to come in later, and then I want this very typical shape of the weaver's nest. It's got a little tummy here, like this, and then it's got the little holes, so you've got that type of thing. And then we're going to run it across the top here. So I'm not really doing any careful sketching, I'm just getting the idea. And then we're going to have these little pieces of grass that dangle off and create interest. Okay, so we've got the base, got a little stick that comes out here, which we're going to do more carefully. And then we've got, I'm not sure if I want to put this stick in here. This stick is a bit of an interruption, but it is part of the structure of the weaver's nest. So we're going to get that there. Okay, and once again, this is really something that's easy enough to do at home. And so we got background noise, hooting and all sorts, which is no problem, because this is a garden studio. I'm using acrylic, basic acrylic paint, and I'm really going to plaster it on here. You know, plaster it on and make it really thick, so you can see how this is very thick. A very hot day today, so as usual in the summer, well, summer in South Africa, and using a pallet knife to get my shape. And what you'll see happening is I'm going to be scratching into it. It's called sgraffito, and we're going to put that on there. Got to work fairly quickly because the heat is going to dry out the paint. Okay, so we're going around creating the actual shape of the weaver's nest. I'm going to be using the point of my palette knife to cut into this paint. I'm using the point here, and all the way along I'm keeping an eye on my reference. So I've put my reference right up at the top here. Okay, so it's above the painting, and I'm using a canvas board. And what I'm going to do now is start to scratch into this with the top of a palette knife, with the tip, and it kind of goes all over the place, and making these marks, and these little tie marks that happen in here. And don't be afraid to use heavy texture. You know, it's quite thick. Paint is quite thick. And I'm watching the angle of the grasses that have been made up here, and trying to keep the shape of my weaver's nest. So there we go. We're going to do this pretty darkly later on, so you will see. Now I'm going to try and get some paint on the tip of my brush, on the tip of my palette knife here. I'm going to go in there, continue the shape. I can hardly see anything inside, the little hole where the bird would actually go. So I'm going to push this back a bit and scratch it in and just get a little bit of texture in this point here. Pick up some more on my finger. With acrylic paint, you want to just be careful that you don't get the acrylic inside your fingernails, up at the cuticle here, because it really is, don't worry about getting your fingers dirty, but it's not healthy really to have that plastic paint in there. Now I'm cutting it with the edge of my knife there, cutting it up, so I'm getting these finer marks, crisscrossing, and looking at my reference all the time, looking here at my reference. And we're nearly there, we're nearly at the first stage. This is just a weaver's nest that's been abandoned, and I cut it down off our tree in the garden studio, and we get a little point in here. That'll be quite nice, a little bit heavy. Just push it back a bit here. What I've done is I've actually repainted this board with PVA acrylic, just a normal hardware PVA acrylic, to give it a matte feel. Okay, and I'm not too happy with this little blob that happened there. I want the consistency of the texture must be kind of consistent, as I say, from all around. It must have that feel that it's on one level. So just keep an eye on it as we go. And then what we can do is there's this little stick. So I'm going to do this again, and I'm going to use just the edge of the palette knife to get a nice piece there, and I'm going to run it down the side like that, and we're going to finish up with this section, and we're going to come back with the next section. Actually, there's one more. There's a little piece here that I want to put in, and I'm just using it very gently on the side of the palette knife, and I'm pretty happy with that. So this is going to be this way. It's going to be a vertical painting. Give you an idea of the textures that happen there. Yeah, like that. See you in the next clip. Now our acrylic, our white acrylic, has dried completely. Took a long time because it's very, very heavy, very thick. And now it's completely dry. So what we're going to do is mix up a dark color. I'm going to start here. I'm going to start right here because that's what I know. And remember the light. This is just a little burnt sienna. And I'm going to touch a little bit of black. And if you've been watching any of the other videos, you remember I'll say that black is tricky. Yep, black is tricky. So just use it sparingly. It's good to use, yep, but I usually use it with a color. So there I've got a very dark, kind of a brown. I'm going to water it down a little so that it's not so heavy, and let's just begin and see what happens. The light is coming from, I want the light to come from this side. So the darkest area is going to be right in the inside of this little hole that the bird makes, the weaver makes. And I'm thinning my paint down because I want it to wrap around the texture. We must make this a little bigger, a little bit bigger. Yeah, there we go. And now, getting a bigger brush, put my smaller flat into the jar. I'm just going to start skinning this, the outside of the weaver's nest. And I want it to fall into those valleys that have been made by the texture. it's very watery, so what's going to happen is this dark area is going to bleed into the light area, which is okay. It's merely an undercoat. And because my light is coming from this side, I'm going to darken the opposite side of the nest. So it's going to be a little bit darker on the opposite side, and you can see very clearly the textures coming through, and our nest is beginning to form itself. Get that little brush again. I'll get another brush. This is one of my favorite brushes in the garden studio, and it's just wonderful with all the birds in the background. This is an abandoned nest, so we've got all these little strings had been pulled off. They've been pulled off by the female weaver, and I'm going to emphasize this little stick that the nest is on. They would choose a stick in a tree, and then they shred it. They shred it of all the leaves that were on the stick, so that the snakes have more difficulty getting into the nest. Which is very, very interesting. And there we have it. That's the start. Tiny, tiny brush. Well, not so small. I think it's size 4. Yeah, no, 6, size 6. 6 round. And I'm going to just get this darker on the left hand side. We're not looking at the nest at the right angle. What I've done is turned it. I'll show you right away what that texture looks like. It's a fantastic way of getting your... So that's what the texture looks like. Hey man, it looks really cool. You can even go darker inside here. But I think what I'll do... Well, no, we could do it now. Darker on this side of it. There we go. There we go. So now, dark, light. What I'm going to do now, give it a break so that this can thoroughly dry, and then we come back to it and see what the next step is. So my weaver's nest is dried, but I don't like this marker on the side, so I'm going to take some paint and try and reduce it down, get it a bit back to the original, and around this area I want to have very little texture. We'll have to let that dry to do a second layer, second coat. And I think I'm going to try and put a bluish grey, as if it were sky, but it mustn't read as sky totally, but it would read as a background. So the foreground will come, it will be warm. The foreground will be warm. And now I'm going to water down my my white paint, and I'm going to pick up some highlights in the areas that I see. There's our original. That's the original one. So I'm looking at getting these areas here as highlights. So I'm just going to begin with the white, and I might add raw sienna. Careful, this is wet, so we just see what happens over here, and we're creating some highlights in the front, bringing this forward. I want this to come forward. So kind of following the texture, using the texture as a guide, yeah, and then picking up on these pieces of grass that are coming forward. Very, 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 very lightly Okay, that's too white, so that's okay because I'm going to stain that with some raw sienna. So we used burnt sienna and black, burnt sienna and dark over here, and now I'm going to just touch this with raw sienna. So it's a very, very useful color, raw sienna and burnt sienna. I understand that umbers are derivative of the word umbrella, so it gives you the sense that it's a foreshadowing umber, whereas siennas are more of a clay color, and raw sienna is almost as if it's like uncooked. Burnt sienna has been cooked like a cookie. There we go. I like it a lot. So I'm going to use it again, picking up some paint directly from the tub. Get my white in there, a little bit of water in here, and my raw sienna. And what I'm doing is I'm going to be looking at my original reference, which is that. You see a whole lot of marks that come in here. So I'm twisting my brush, twisting it as I go along, and getting these marks and these marks. So that's white with raw sienna, and I'm not trying too hard to make it perfect. Get some marks coming out there. We've got some paint marks here, which is another indication of this is a branch, and now this part here is going to just create some random grasses that are coming out. And twisting your brush gives you the freedom to drag it, dragging my brush in kind of random way. Okay, and then what I want to do now is, this is fairly dry, the white. I'm going to pick up some heavier white, and I'm just going to get that mark to go away. Okay, and it's at this stage we could actually like put a frame on it and see what it does. It's my regular frame for everything. I've only got one frame, and it just gives you an idea of what it does. Look, really cool. I like it a lot. So this gives you a bit of a detail of what's happened randomly, putting the texture paste or pure acrylic, and you can see how the paint has fallen into all the little gaps and the little valleys. So there we go. Now I'm thinking about whether to put a bird in here. Might be a good idea, using the third mark. So we'll see. So at the moment I'm going to just dust this, our opposite edge, with the dark to get it to be really dark. Yeah. And it gives it a better shape. Form. It gives it a better form. Actually, that's the right word. Form is your roundedness, and I'm very happy with that as it is. I'm going to blue the background. Okay, we're coming to the end of this painting, and what I'm doing is blue and orange opposite the color wheel. So I'm watering down my blue a lot, so that I can go over the whole. Well, I'm going to fade the blue out. I'm adding orange because I don't want it to be so bright, and see what the color is. Okay, it's a kind of blue, maybe. Well, it actually could work. It actually could work. And if it doesn't work, then we just have to paint the background again. So let's go. I flattened out my canvas board a lot, so that hopefully it doesn't run too much. And I'm starting on the dark background side and just staining it, getting it to stain, something there. What I'm going to do is I'm putting the paint on, and I want to actually take some of it off again, especially up here. So the blue's shining through, blue's starting to come through, and it just gives me an interesting background. There we go, that's looking nice. And before it dries, I'm going to take some of it off. We put that in there. We get a big brush and we just take some of it back off. Turn my brush. This brush is dry, so it's going to pull the paint off. Try to pick up any hairs that come off the brush as you're going. I don't like hair in my paintings. Not very much hair, mustn't be any hair. And that's pretty much it. I think that's cool. It actually does read as blue, which is very interesting because it was, I think it's the texture of the canvas that's showing the blue. There we go. And these dry marks that are happening now, I didn't plan, but it kind of reads with the grass area as well. Dry marks that are going here. There we go. It's just lightly dusting it. Okay, thank you for watching. Great. Yeah.